Hi everyone. So today we're going to talk about whether Portuguese people are considered Latinos or whether Portuguese people are not considered Latinos. So the reason why I decided to make this video is because this is a topic that comes around pretty frequently and I've noticed there's a lot of misconception about it. So we'll start by the beginning, which is defining the word Latino. So as we know, Latino, just like any other word, it has many different meanings. Okay, so we know that one word has sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different meanings, and they are usually defined by their context. That's how you can tell if cool can mean something that's not hot, or something that's really desirable, or something that it's okay. So I'll start off by defining the word Latino. Latino comes from the Latin latium, which refers to the area of the Seven Hills, which is located nowadays in what is now Rome, and that's where the beginning of the ancient Rome, civilization of the ancient Romans started. So since you guys probably already know, the ancient Latins conquered all of Italy, pretty much all of Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and also almost close to India. So that explains that civilization had an enormous impact, had an enormous importance, even to this day. Result of that conquest was that Latin became the language spoken by tons of millions of different cultures that probably had nothing in common other than that language. It became pretty much the language of knowledge also during many centuries, even after the Roman Empire had collapsed. So it was still, Latin, the language, had a huge importance. Though it is considered an dead language, meaning that nobody speaks Latin every day anymore, it gave birth to several different languages that evolved over time from colloquial Latin into separate languages. And those languages are, so Portuguese, can be also French, Spanish, Italian, and also two that are often forgotten, Romanian and Moldovan. So all those languages have in common the fact that they took heavily after Latin. They've evolved. Nowadays, people who speak all those different Romance languages do not understand Latin if they didn't learn it. So even though they have that Latin as an ancestor, those languages are now different enough to be considered different languages. And all those languages, like I said, are called, who have Latin as an ancestor, are called the Romance languages. So all those languages, especially French, Portuguese, and Spanish, have the particularity, due to history of conquests and colonization, that they were brought about to many different populations in the Americas, in Africa, and also in Asia. So those languages are no longer just the language of one nation. They became cross-cultural languages. People from different continents still speak the same language. For instance, in Quebec, we know that they speak French, as well as in Belgium, also in France, and also in several African countries such as Senegal, Mali, and so on and so on. So this brings us to understand that those languages derived from Latin do not belong to a single culture, but are really cross-cultural. So how did the term Latino, as far as ethnicity, came about? So it was not until the 19th century when Napoleon Bonaparte, the dictator of France at the time, coined that term when he wanted to designate the part of America that was not colonized by the English. So we know that the north of America was mainly colonized by the British, which is now the United States and Canada, where the rest of the Americas were shared between Portugal, Spain, and a little bit France. So he wanted to pretty much differentiate those two sides of the Americas based on the language that was used there. So that term, he didn't know probably at the time that he coined, became extremely important and became part of an identity of all those people who live pretty much south of the border of the United States. It became part of their identity, cultural identity, not only linguistic but also cultural. It came from being Latin America to Latino. So this term gained special importance and it became really a synonym for an ethnicity when it started being used by the US Census. As you guys know, the United States still asks people to disclose their quote-unquote race or ethnicity. So every time you fill out a paper, they'll ask you if you are Caucasian, Asian, Latino, African American. So they define the word Latino as someone from origin in Spanish-speaking countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and so on and so forth. So even though originally it was nothing more than a linguistic family, it took the connotation of a cultural group, of something that's a cultural, not only linguistic, but also pretty much almost racial connotation, cultural connotation. And even though they give a pretty specific definition, it is important to understand that the US Census definition of Latino is not scientific and is not anthropological. It's pretty much arbitrary and solely for the purpose of the census and of establishing statistics. It is not meant to be used universally because outside of the United States it wouldn't make too much sense anymore. But since the United States is so important culturally, exports a lot of culture overseas, so that term started to also become exported because it is used for the census but also as a marketing tool. We all know that a lot of things in the US are promoted as being Latino, like Latino music, for instance. We all heard of salsa, merengue, and those type of musics. So we pretty much all have a very good idea of what is a Latino person. Usually it's someone from Latin America who usually speaks Spanish. So as such, how could a Portuguese person being from Europe being categorized also and lumped under the term of Latino? So the reason for that is that it's sort of an abuse of language. It's pretty much like same thing as someone from Peru, from Bolivia. They're called Americans because they live in the American continent. And someone from the United States is also going to be called an American because that's the way people call themselves. They denominate themselves as Americans. So all are Americans, but we know that they're not the same. They're from different countries. We mean something very different. So it's a little bit the same thing there. Being a speaker of a language that's based on Latin does not make you Latino, as necessarily. So as we said, that it was originally coined as Latino American. So someone who's a Latino American speaks a Romance language and is from Latin America, whereas someone who would be from Europe and speaking a Romance language would be a Romance speaker, a Romance language speaker only. And there's a whole lot of confusion there, a whole lot of misconceptions. So it's important to understand that it's not a homogeneous cultural group, because for instance, I'll share my experience with you. I was born in France. My family is from Portugal. A few years ago I moved to the United States, to Southern California, and which is home to a huge population of people from Mexico, from Central America, and so on. And there I, by discussing and looking around and mingling with people, I got to notice that the culture from those countries were very different from what I was used to, from what I knew. So then it really struck me that that term Latino has to be kept in a certain context, otherwise it is completely erroneous concept. So to conclude, I would say that Portuguese people are Romance language speakers, Europeans, but not Latinos. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to give us a thumbs up, and I thank you very much for watching.